Hey everybody, Jay Schlansky here from the Fifth Trooper Network. I just want to take a moment to thank you for checking out this show. Did you know that over at thefifthtrooper.com we have tons of other content, including blogs, other podcasts, all kinds of stuff. In addition, if you want access to exclusive content, you can join us on patreon.com/thefifthtrooper and join at any level and you'll get access to exclusive blog articles, access to our private Discord, and much more. So please check us out, and thank you so much for all your support.
Welcome to the Notorious Scoundrels, a Star Wars Legion podcast bringing you the latest news, general perspective, and competitive discussion.
Hello and welcome back to the Notorious Scoundrels podcast. I'm Kyle. I'm here with Mike and Matt Bronson. What's up, gentlemen?
Hey.
Hello.
Matt, tell us a little bit about yourself. Is this your first time on Scoundrels? Officially?
I guess it is, yes, officially.
Yeah.
I'm Matt. I've been playing Legion since I bought it in day one, literally on release day, but didn't get to play it for a while. I was just kind of starting to get into the competitive scene right before COVID hit, and then played a bit on TTS, and then really hit up a bunch of events in what would have been 2022, 2022, and very end of 2021. Started hitting up a lot of stuff. But now I live in Europe, and I'll be going to less tournaments just because,
Because there aren't as many.
Lots of flights and such.
Yeah.
I'll find out exactly how many there are. But it's cool, get to play different people. But kind of the old. I had a lay of the land for the old circuit. Like, okay, hey, I like this event, just because of certain reasons, and now I kind of got to rediscover that.
And you have the Bombad Generals podcast, and you're also a writer for Shatterpoint on our blog. Is that right?
Yes. I am doing a lot of Shatterpoint these days. And I think technically for the time being, at least until they get fed up with me, I'm the only Shatterpoint writer. Doc wrote like one or two articles back in the day. So if you're reading about Shatterpoint on the Fifth Trooper, probably me, putting out one article a month, and then also after this, immediately, don't waste any time, go download every episode of Bombad Generals and listen to that. You can't miss it. It's a big picture of Jar Jar on our thumbnail, so should not get mixed up with. I think there was a band or something on Spotify that was also for some reason named Bombad Generals, but
it's a great name.
It's an awesome name. If you're into Star Wars stuff. If you're not into Star Wars stuff, I could see it kind of not making a lot of sense.
I think it's fair to say there are a lot of band names that don't make sense unless you're kind of in on the joke.
That's true. That's very fair.
And some that don't make sense, even if you are. So
I haven't listened to their music. Honestly, maybe it's like Gungan inspired music and should be in every playlist I make. So I do. That reminds me, I do need to check it out just in case.
Well, there you go. I'd be curious.
I'm a
to
big
know
Gungan
what you discover.
fan.
Okay.
Yeah. If and when we get the Gungan Battle Force in Legion, I think that'll ignite my passion in a big way.
It's got to be coming, right? It's got to be.
You would think. You would think. I'm holding out for 2024 because it's the 25th anniversary of Phantom Menace, and they're doing all this 40th anniversary stuff this year for Return of the Jedi. So I'm hoping. We'll see. We've got Geonosians, which are kind of the counterpoint to Gungans in a sense.
And Ewoks are kind of the thematic / tonal brothers of the Gungans. So Ewoks, I think, opened the door a little bit to the not taking themselves too seriously, but still hilarious and awesome Battle Force concept. So
I mean, the Gungans at least had a standing army. Right?
They did.
They
did.
And
sort of like modern weapons in that they had like ion technology and shields and stuff like that. So
that's what we need right now. We need a hard counter to separatist list. That's exactly what we need right now.
Another Republic.
Yeah.
got kind of hard countered by separatists though back in the day. It wasn't going well for them.
They didn't do great in that battle.
Yeah.
Despite having a bunch of ion weapons.
Ion 3000 and everything.
Yeah, right. But that's neither here nor there. All right. Well, great to have you on the show. We are going to talk about counters to things today. That's kind of going to be the theme, the main theme, if you will, of this episode, because PAX Unplugged is next weekend. That's a World Open qualifier in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, which is in the United States of America. In case you didn't know that.
Noted.
Yeah. And both Mike and I are going to that. So, as well as lots of other people from our local area, and just lots of other people generally that play on the Legion circuit. So, it'll be a great time. Are you excited, Mike?
Yeah, I mean, yes, I am excited. I am.
You sound very excited. Yeah.
I know. I think so for me, this PAX is the start of a very busy December in which I'm not going to be home for like 4 weeks straight. So
Yeah, okay.
I'm a little bit anxious about that. I'm pretty much, we're getting home from PAX and I'm getting on a plane like 6 hours, well, I guess like 12 hours later. And then just like not going to come and be home for 3 weeks. So yes, I am excited for PAX. I haven't really thought about it a ton. In fact, I bought my ticket like 2 days ago. So
Better late than never.
yeah, I mean, I've been signed up on Game Up like
Yeah,
forever. And PAX isn't like an event that they like stop selling tickets for because it's like
enormous.
There's no like cap. I don't think. At least in any of the years that we've had it. So yeah, I'm excited. I'm just competitively going to continue doing my thing, and so nothing on my end's really changing. I'm pretty locked and loaded these days. So
hey, ain't broke, don't fix.
Yeah. Well, from that viewpoint.
that was a loaded euphemism in that context. Yeah, you keep doing what you're doing. Whether or not it needs to be fixed from a balance perspective is a topic for another day.
Yes.
Let's put it that way. All right. Well, what do you guys expect? So I'm gonna open this with, I know we've had many months now with the new rules and the most recent points changes / balance update, and I feel like things have kind of settled a little bit. So I know that can be its own discussion in itself. So let's not take that statement for granted either. But I'm going to caveat. That's a way of saying that when we go into this making predictions, at least for me personally, I don't think anything that I'm going to say is going to be like a surprise to anybody about what I expect to do well from each faction. So that's going to be like part one, probably the hopefully the shorter part of this discussion, and then part two is going to be like, okay, suppose you don't want to bring one of those things. If you want to do like a counter meta pick to counter, if those are the things that you expect to see and you want to bring something else, you want to be a little bit hipster, what should you think about bringing? What options do you have to kind of hang with those lists? The term counter meta, I feel like, is kind of misleading because sometimes it's like a legit hard counter in the case of, you have something like Dark Troopers, right, where you could just run a crazy impact skew and then that would be a hard counter to Dark Troopers. But I think most of the time it means like something that can sort of hang with those meta lists and maybe affect them in ways that are surprising and those players aren't used to. But it doesn't necessarily mean that it's going to be like a rock, paper, scissors thing where the meta list is rock and you're suddenly bringing paper, So, yeah. Anyway, what do you guys expect to do well at PAX? Let's start with that.
So before we jump into that, I did want to just color this conversation with a little bit of empirical data that we have.
Okay.
So I'm looking at the presently registered factions
Same.
for PAX.
Okay.
The current breakdown is 10 Republic. I think it's 2 or 3 Separatists, 6 Rebels, 5 Mercenaries, and 1 Empire. And that's roughly, it's like a little somewhere, it's like 24-ish.
Man, people are
Yeah, so like a
slacking.
third of
Lists
people-ish.
are due
Yeah.
like a few hours from when this recording is
I mean,
gonna end.
mine isn't in here, so
Okay.
Republic will be at 11 at a bare
Yeah.
minimum.
Okay.
But I think I just wanted to like put that out there because this is a third of the list that will be at PAX. And that is an interesting skip.
I'm
Before
utterly
we-
shocked by the Empire.
Yes,
By
me
one
too.
Empire's hey, maybe Empire has enough decent options that they're taking their time before settling on one particular list.
That's very possible. I mean I think it's completely possible that this is not indicative of what we're gonna see at PAX, but this is a third of the field.
Yeah. I'll both say something very uncontroversial and then something maybe not controversial, but more surprising, tagging along with this. Because yeah, I was recently at a World Open qualifier myself that had a very similar breakdown with Republic coming in at, I think it was just over half the lists when I checked, and made up, I think, 6 of the top 8, all of the top 4. So I don't think I'm breaking any ground saying I expect Republic to be doing well. It should, just based off of the numbers. But you know, you got many different flavors of Yoda with 1-2 arcs. I'm sure you guys have talked a lot about that. One thing that surprised me a bit, and I haven't really been following the meta back home per se, but there was a decent showing for Fluttercraft within that Republic. So I'm not sure if you guys have seen that. Something I would keep an eye out for. It's a way to play Republic, but also have that kind of speeder game that's a bit different than Barks, because Barks into a mirror match, not necessarily super effective all the time. It's certainly harder to make them work with that dice pool and no Pierce. So getting a bit stronger dice pool with Pierce from the Fluttercraft and innate cover 2 the whole time. So it's going to be a bit better against long range arc sniper fire. So I'm interested to see that. The weird thing about Flutters is it's like a logistical issue. It's not even necessarily a meta thing. Like just getting on a plane with those things can be a bit nerve-wracking.
Yeah.
They're
fragile models.
Better bring your super glue.
Yeah.
Super glue. Yeah, I don't know if super glue is going to help you most of the time. To be honest.
Have them
Super glue and
magnetized.
your pin, magnetize them. Bring a hobby drill and a pinning kit as like a backup.
And under no circumstances check that back.
Yes. Wrap them in bubble wrap.
Yeah.
Very much.
Yeah. You should really never check a miniatures bag.
I generally agree with that.
Yeah. I always, mine fits under the seat, and I would always recommend. This is a totally separate topic, but you should pretty much always like plan to just bring something that fits under your seat, because if you get shafted and you're like one of the last people on the plane and they're like, our overhead space is full, like you want to be able to shove that minis bag under your seat in front of you. So doubly true for Fluttercraft, and even then a little bit of turbulence and those bad boys are going to be in trouble.
You could do what I did with my AA5 back at I think that was the 2021 SoCal Open, and literally I just had it on my lap the entire flight because I did not want that thing getting busted.
Isn't that thing just like a brick though? I feel like you could throw that thing in a wall.
Hey, it was very nicely painted. Okay, I don't glue them down to the base because I want them to. I dry fit them so you can take off the model, and if that thing pops off, it is just tumbling around in there, just knocking everything off.
Was yours the graffiti one at SoCal Open?
It was, yeah, the Sabine graffiti.
Okay, yeah. So you won best painted at SoCal Open. I remember that. Yeah,
it's 10 feet right over there.
Yeah,
if the viewers want to see it, but I bet everyone just listens anyways.
It looks great. I can say that much. I remember it because it was so stunning, and also because it beat me out for best painted. I had to settle for best rebel.
Best rebel because the actual best rebel got best overall. Just saying.
That's right.
Now I don't want to talk about who won that event and who didn't win that event, but Maybe the roles were reversed there.
It's in the past.
Yeah. So I mean, I took the easy one with the Republic, but I think that's my more of a sleeper is potentially some form of Fluttercraft list, and maybe when we get to the next section, I might have a thought as well with something involving flutters.
Were these flutters in these European tournaments? Were they part of a Wookiee battle force, or were they just
One of them was.
randomly like in a clone list?
One of them was
Okay.
in a Wookiee battle force,
Okay.
and that might be. I mean, I could talk about it now, but
Let's
I can
save
save
it.
it for part 2. Yeah.
Let's save it for part 2. What about you, Mike? Besides Yoda, what do you expect to do well?
I strongly suspect that any lists, including Cassian, I think that there's no surprise here that Rebels are the second most taken faction on the factions that are signed up right now. I think a lot of it is Cassian Ahsoka shenanigans, if I had to bet. Although I hear some people are bringing Han. And
I don't know who those crazy people are.
yeah, I don't know either. So I mean, I think Cassian Ahsoka lines have been pretty sturdy. They're pretty resilient, I think, to a diverse kind of population of potential opponents. It can flex pretty well, I think, objective wise. Yeah, I mean, I also think the Shadow Collective, again, I think it's like large numbers of pikes is still really good. And I think one of the reasons that we don't see it and haven't seen it in person is more a function of, similar to like the Flutters, a logistics issue. I think a lot of people just don't own 6 pikes squads. Frankly, it's a lot of bandwidth to put on the table. If you're not, like, you've got to buy in really hard into that.
Yep. As someone that owns 6 pikes but does not have the mental energy to paint 6 pikes, I sympathize with that.
Yeah, because I actually, I think pikes might be the strongest non-Yoda lists in Legion right now. I think we'll talk about that a little bit more when we get to the counter stuff. But
yep, I
I
tend to
think
agree with that.
just generally speaking, I think this will come up again. Pikes are one of those lists that when points changes, especially, obviously, some errata kind of hit them as well, but with point changes, they were drastic enough that it basically shaved a whole activation off, which at the time, when Blizzard Force was really coming into its own and whatnot, going and 10-act Dark Troopers, going from 10 acts down to 9 acts was a big deal. I think now that we're seeing a lot of success from, these 8-act Yoda lists or, other lower activation things, going back to something like Maul with pikes and saying, oh, I only squeeze 9 activations out is not that hindering, whereas before it might have felt a little worse. So I think that is something that kind of reopens the door on lists like that.
yeah, I agree.
Yeah, it also seems like, I mean, people figure out new ways to do old things, so to speak, all the time. Right. And that your version of the Yoda list is a great example of that, where historically Yoda was an objective skew list, and you're like, what if Yoda was just a gunline list? And it turns out maybe that's even better. And I think it's kind of the same with pikes. The traditional wisdom is to run the pikes with the capo personnel upgrade and all that, but people are like, well, what if you just saved a bunch of points on that and spent it on more dodge tokens? Like the supplies that give you free dodge tokens and stuff like that, and maybe that's even better. So I think it's a combination of what you said, Matt, and that having that activation cut is less bad than it was when that first happened. I think that's probably the primary thing, but also people are finding different ways to use pikes than the quote unquote traditional way, in a way that like increases their dodge generation efficiency even more. It's having played against lists like that, it's really hard to kill anything.
It's super
I
hard
think
to kill stuff. Yeah.
As well, some of it's like kind of forced creativity with things like choke being changed. That was a very
Yes.
popular upgrade on Maul. Now that it's been nerfed and it's 10 points, people are more apt to look at, force barrier on Maul if they want to go even tankier. Or my personal favorite, I always like burst of speed on Maul. Obviously, it was nice when it was 3 points and not 10, but burst of speed Maul is a crazy objective piece, and you're a lot more likely now to look at something like that because of the changes to choke, whereas before I think a lot of people just said, choke, throw it in there, boom.
I also
And
think,
Wasn't necessarily wrong. Choke was also very good for what it did.
choke was quite excellent.
Yeah.
Well, and part of I mean, you could argue the opposite too, and that because of the choke nerf, that made dodge spam even better than it was. And that includes pike dodge spam, by the way.
Yeah.
So, there's two sides to that coin as well. And it's kind of both things working, it's a push and a pull at the same time. But
yeah, I also think like with, you're talking about like rediscovering old things, swapping like one upgrade that there are a lot of upgrades that are just like not really played in Legion. And sometimes just like going back to something that's not played a lot and injecting it into something that's already like kind of fringe and it changes like how the list is played, can like dramatically alter how well a list performs. And a lot of times people just like don't look at a lot of these upgrades because they're perceived to be bad, right? And I mean, like, force guidance.
Yep.
Like people thought that card was really, I thought that card was really bad for a long time. And I was like, on a whim, like, yeah, I'll throw this in a list, see how it does. I'm like, force guidance is great, guys.
There are cards that within a very narrow window of, if you know exactly why you're taking it and how it functions, unlocks quite a bit.
Totally. And I think sometimes you just have to like, finding that is really hard, I guess is all I'm trying to say.
Well, and I think it's because in that example, force guidance is, I think, what we would think of as a situationally good upgrade, right? It serves a very specific purpose in your Yoda list, because Yoda lists tend to have a trouble with surge generation. It's not like Anakin, who gets 2 free surges a turn that he can share with anybody, right? So Yoda needs like a different way to generate those, and force guidance provides that. So
solves a problem.
Right, exactly. It solves a problem. It fills a hole. It shores up a weakness in a very specific list concept,
and
in a very specific way.
It's a list that supports one of the main problems with force guidance of the tension of wanting to go early with it, and having good universal shares. Like in that list, generally you don't mind as much going early with Yoda, getting extra tokens on the board, whether that's guidancing Padme with a quick thinking, but also giving out tokens with force guidance. Whereas before, a lot of Jedi, you kind of want to save them right till the end, and that's another issue with force guidance. So it's like a perfect storm of everything kind of coming together.
Yep. Yeah, I think generally speaking, force guidance is still an objectively terrible upgrade.
You shouldn't put it on anything other than Yoda. I probably okay.
Yeah,
I'm not. Somebody might unlock it somewhere else, but really, all I'm trying to say, and we've talked about Yoda plenty. Is that like I think one of the reasons those pike lists work without the kappa is LBE, right? Like lead by example.
Lead by example.
Yep. Yeah. Like being able to just like inject a way to continue to deal with the suppression issues, and it's not like people didn't know that before, but
right.
I think there are things you can put into lists that aren't tried a lot because of conventional wisdom or conventional
groupthink.
Yeah.
Yep, I agree. All right, so we've got Republic generally, which I think we should you mentioned obviously that your dark horse flutters, Matt. I think that obviously includes Yoda and Anakin lists. Mike, you brought up Cassian, basically any Cassian rebel list, but especially Cassian Ahsoka.
Yep.
I'm gonna throw Cad Banes and Magna Guards in there.
Mhm.
I think that's kind of emerged as like the most consistent separatist list. You know, you've got Cad Bane for the objective shenanigans and just general shenanigans. You've got the Magna Guard because Magna Guard are great. And you've got some quantity of B1s with those E5Ss for critical, which is obviously very important. So just a good, generally all-rounder list. And then that leaves us with, and of course we mentioned the pikes, the Shadow Collective pike lists. And there's, like you said, Mike, there's of the faction breakdown, there's actually 5 mercenaries, and that is just Shadow Collective, by the way. Ewoks are not counted as mercenaries in Game Uplink; they're counted as rebel.
Yeah.
So that actually seems high to me. Like we have had tournaments where it's been like 2 to 3 Shadow Collective, so
I'm
that's already, I think, a little bit high.
I'm unsurprised by this statistic. I I think it is, not to like jump the gun here, but I think it is the faction that plays into what people are perceiving to be the big bad in the room the best.
Yes, I agree with that. So what we haven't discussed here is Empire, and I don't know if this is going to be a little bit of a hot take or not. I actually think Empire is not in a great spot right now. The reason being, if
I
history is any
agree.
guide, when arcs are good, Empire is not. And that's like a little bit of an oversimplification. Um, but generally speaking, I think Empire has a great array of like all-rounder lists that can do lots of different things. But what Empire doesn't do well is generate dodge tokens. Or basically Empire has a bunch of like relatively cheap red saves, but those red saves don't tend to come with extra defensive tech. And arcs don't have high velocity, but if you're dealing with, you know, an opponent that doesn't generate dodge tokens or have low profile or any other fancy defensive tech like that, those red saves that, you know, you're paying a little bit of a premium for over just normal white saves with no defensive tech don't really help you. So Empire Core tends to get shredded by Republic, and right now Republic is very good. So again, a little bit of an oversimplification, but I know Empire is like has been very good very recently. But I feel like Empire, we're hitting a little bit of a lull with them simply because, you know, as Republic goes up, Empire tends to go down. You know, it's kind of a wax wane thing. At least we've seen that historically, and I feel like we're in a situation where it's, you know, if this were like a fantasy football stock watch type thing, it's like Republic stock up, Empire stock down, right? It's like a running back committee where one running back is getting the more touches than the other, and right now the lead back is the one getting all the goal line looks is Republic. So at the expense of Empire. So I don't know, maybe that's a little bit of a hot take to say that like Empire's not as good right now, but I don't know.
I think that there are Empire lists out there that are good. I think the the Empire meta has not, excuse me, shaken out really. I think it's Blizzard has, I think, been kind of dethroned as the like quintessential, if you're playing Empire, this is like what you want to be doing right now. I think it's pretty clear that Blizzard is not really that at this juncture. And I think that it has been that way for so long that we're kind of like figuring out what is Empire right now in a way that they're like consistently going to be winning things. That's not to say you can't play at Blizzard and like win, but it's definitely not the list it used to be. And I don't think it's the strongest Empire list that I've seen lately. Like I think it's got some significant weaknesses in the current meta. And so I think figuring out I don't. If I was bringing Empire to a tournament right now, I don't know what I'd be bringing, because I'm not really sure what is actually good enough that I would feel comfortable bringing it. That's my take on kind of where that's at.
I think individually Empire still has a lot of decent tools. Like they've got stuff in a lot of different slots. They've still got good core. They've got some special forces, that can do some stuff. Guardian, easy access to Guardian with IRGs. Some good sniping options with Iden and Inferno. They've got bounty hunters. Speeder bikes are, a decent cost option for the speed and mobility that they bring, but bringing it all together, I think, like that perfect mix for the current meta is still maybe a little elusive. But they do have enough tools that I wouldn't be too surprised if someone was able to crack the code on that and get something that was really, really working. Because I think the individual components are still good enough that they can make waves when combined in the right way and getting the right matchups too.
Empire definitely has the widest variety of good units. In that, like, if you were to make a tier list of every faction, I think Empire would have the most like A and B tier units.
It's definitely got the most playable, efficient, just like all around good units for sure.
Yeah.
I think
Go ahead. I was just gonna say they've got the most units that, like, you look at and you say, man, if I could just take X unit and put that in this other faction, I would be super happy. Right? Like they've got all those units kind of all in one faction, but together it's just, it's finding that mix.
I think part of that, not that I intended this to turn into like an Empire existential faction identity discussion, but Empire has a lot of units that kind of just do pretty well on their own. They don't have a lot of, and this is, I think, appropriate for Empire because they're the big bad, like, we don't do teamwork kind of faction. But they don't have a lot of units that like directly support each other or help each other, right? So I think it kind of speaks to the, like, they have a lot of like stuff that just does its job pretty well on its own. And if you were to stick them in another faction, all three of the other factions have lots of different options for like synergy and stuff like that. You could support that unit, great. But just in Empire, since Empire is like an entire roster of a bunch of like jack of all trades, lone wolf type units, it's a little bit more, like you said, Matt, like bringing it all together, I think is a little bit more of a struggle. And I think that's on theme for the faction. And I didn't mean to turn this into like a, Empire, where art thou? Like, what are you doing, Empire?
No, don't worry about Empire. Empire is
Empire's going to be fine.
Like 4 months.
I think they'll be fine. Yeah.
I
think there's something out there.
Like, no changes necessary.
Nope.
The meta 4 months from now is already solved.
I wouldn't go that far, but Empire seems to be getting a lot of good stuff shortly on the horizon, and they already have, as we noted, a bunch of good stuff. So I'm not worried about them as a faction overall. I think I just wanted to make the narrow point that, like, they do sort of struggle into good Republic lists that feature arcs, and right now there are some very good Republic lists that feature arcs. So maybe someone will crack that code. They do have access to good, like you said, Matt, they do have access to good snipers, high velocity snipers. Those are things that are good against clones. I don't think they can do that trick as well as Rebels can. But because Rebels have simply more access to long range stuff and more access to long range critical. And Cassian's a better sniper than Iden is, frankly.
Significantly better.
I think somebody might crack that code, but at least for PAX, it's not going to be me.
It definitely, at least to this juncture, seems a little uncracked. And I think it'll be good as once somebody does crack it. I'm sure someone will hit something before Worlds as far as Empire is concerned, but
they definitely can do the best armor skews. And
I do,
there might be
yeah.
something to that.
Mhm.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, a lot of well, is that kind of a transition? Is now that we've
sure,
kind of hit all
yeah,
the fact into
that's a flawless transition to
there we
our
go.
so let's rephrase what lists we're looking to counter here. We've got clone gun lines, which is Yoda and or Anakin. Obviously those two things function very differently from each other, but I think those are probably the best two clone lists. Then you've got Cassian gun lines, most commonly with Ahsoka. You have Cad Bane Magnas in some combination, and then you have Shadow Collective Pikes. So that's 5 different things, basically. So if you're looking for a counter meta option, what is it that you are trying to bring?
Yeah, well, the transition was armor skews, so
Yeah, okay.
I mean, we can kind of talk about that. Now this will not, then this is the thing that goes back to, right, with when we were saying, hey, it's a counter. It might not be a hard counter to anything. And also armor skews especially are something that can get hard counter. So that makes them especially tricky and kind of matchup dependent. If you bring an armor skew and you're facing CAD triple magnas, you're going to have a pretty bad time probably with all that critical and impact that's coming at you. And, you know, same thing with Cassian and you know, if he's rocking multiple FD turrets with that range 5 impact, you're probably going to have a good time. But if you get the right Yoda list, not all of them are bringing that much for RPSs. It's an option, you know, with something like that. Or Pikes, it kind of depends. They've got a bit of impact, but is it going to be fast enough for something like triple ATST? Or I mean, I was saying before the cast, even I think maybe double darks could have a moment again with Boba, just because it plays the I'm going to get in your face quickly and be durable game, similar to the Yoda list, but that also helps against something like Cassian. That's a list that not a lot of stuff can kind of hang with at range. So you have to close the gap and start picking things up at closer range. And something like Double Darks or ATST skew can do that. But you're kind of rolling the dice with lists like that. Because again, there's things that will be very difficult. And sometimes it's more than just the list too, right? Like you could get the same matchup against the same thing, but depending on the table, depending on how the battle cards come out, it'll be a much different game.
Yeah,
So,
no, I mean, I agree. I think to me the most interesting thing about the armor skews is probably the darks. I think we've seen like Gav double dark a couple times at this point. I definitely think it's got the potential to like overwhelm some of those lists. I actually generally think that with most people running barrier on Anakin nowadays, I think it's better into Anakin than Yoda specifically. Just because the Anakin lists have like a harder time fire sporting.
Yeah.
unless they
Generally.
do run Saber, and then you're very sad again.
Unless they run
Yeah.
Saber, which I feel like is like a little bit less traditional at present.
It's currently less common. Yeah.
Yeah. Just because like we haven't seen a lot of armor stuff.
It kind of goes back. Oh, go ahead.
Oh, I was just gonna say like Anakin without barrier is like pretty bad in the mirror, like in the Republic barrier.
Against Yoda.
No,
Or just in general.
just against Republic in general. Like
Yeah.
when Republic's on top, you'd much rather have barrier on Anakin
Yes,
than
100%.
Saber throw.
Yep.
And so I think with kind of how the meta shaping, that's how most people should, in theory, be building their Anakins. So I think with that, like that opens the door, I think, against those lists for armor specifically. I think the Yoda matchup in armor is significantly better just because like I don't know. There's a lot of critical in that list, and I also think that the Pike spam list also has a lot of impact kind of natively.
It can, but then they can get one shot pretty darn quickly once those darks start closing, even before they
yes.
really start closing. Like they have a decent amount of blink impact, but I'm not sure it can do enough fast enough. And it kind of goes back to my point earlier about the lists that got hit with an activation's worth of point upgrades or point increases. I'm thinking about my list from Worlds with Boba and 2 6-man darks. That didn't get hit at all with the Guardian changes because it never relied on the Protector IRG cheese to keep the darks alive. It just has pure wounds.
Yep.
The only problem is it went from 10x down to 9. But again, when you're looking at into a matchup with 8 activations, it's not bad. And depending on what they've got, if it's a Padme versions, it's going to be a little harder to collect the bounty just because Padme obviously has a decent amount of defensive tech. But into Clone Commander versions, on some run both Clone Commander versions, it's not too hard for Boba to pick up that bounty, which can also change the game math quite a bit. So it kind of goes back to Empire having a bunch of different tools and bounty being one of those as well. On the Empire train, when we're talking about, and we'll kind of get off of VO specific, but I think something like maybe mixing Callus in there to disrupt command hand again into the Padme version, kind of less effective because she has some cards that you don't care if you're playing in a mid-turn, but and maybe something similar if you were doing Han. The problem is you have to play Han, but you do get change of plans.
Yeah, Kyle.
which can mess up with Yoda quite a bit.
Yeah, you do have to play Han. I don't know. I've always enjoyed Han, but that was also back in the day when he killed stuff.
Yeah.
So
Give
we'll
him
see.
More dice or Sharpshooter 2, something.
Sharpshooter
Just
2
something.
and high velocity.
I feel like we're
already
forgetting
pitched
that
this.
we errated steady onto his card already.
Just because he can
forgotten.
shoot more often
Yes.
doesn't mean that his shots are any more effective, Mike.
It made him useful again, and now everything else has made him not useful again.
Yes. Yeah.
I think Han is a solvable thing with just make him like 80 points, whatever. Problem solved.
That'd be fine too.
Yes,
that'd be fine.
Just make him cheap.
Yeah,
It
100
doesn't have
points
to be.
is a lot for, because then you're just paying for his cards, really. And like if you get value out of the pistol, whatever. That's
Great.
not super, doesn't feel thematic for me with Han, because Han's thing is that he like murders people with his pistol. But
No, it's not. Han is not a warrior. Han is a KG smuggler that's like doing head gamey things. He's not like
Thematically,
killing people.
have you played Han in Battlefront 2?
Is that canon though? Is that
Yeah,
canon?
Are
your multiplayer games in Battlefront 2 canon? I don't think so.
That's
but
like,
thematically, Han charging into stuff with steady, but then not actually killing anything is pretty on point.
It's super odd brand.
It's
Yeah.
100%. It's the card art and Reckless Diversion. That's what that is.
Lando could use the same treatment. I love the Lando Chewie Han combo, but those, other than Chewie, those guys are just well overcosted.
Yeah, just bring all the rebel heroes that aren't played down like 20 points. Bing bang boom.
That's fine too. Yeah, I'd rather see their killing ability go up because they're supposed to be the scrappy heroes against all odds. But yes, and particularly like just low dice pools, low count dice pools. Just you can't get out of cover shots anymore, even at close range. So it's like if you're throwing 2 dice, you're throwing 2 dice into things.
Yeah.
And
people throw less than
Pierce 1.
Less than 10 dice at a time these days. I don't understand. What?
It happens with other factions, Mike.
I know. So here's a hot take. I think if there was ever a time for our boy, the man in charge, Count Dooku, to get back into the game,
Interesting.
It is right now.
Okay, explain.
It is right now. I think, and to a lesser extent, Asajj. I think Makashi, and just being able to like have the potential to like one shot a Yoda, out of all of these lists would be gigantic. People just don't play those pieces really.
But how would you do that when he has access to like 3 to 4 dodges?
You gotta deal with that beforehand, right? Like you gotta maybe like chip a couple in. But I also think Dooku specifically with his 3-pip has a real play into like all of the Republic shenanigans that are happening right now, and that all the Republic lists are very critically relying on precise positioning of all of their units and things that scatter things, or for instance move them speed 2 and then you force push them again, and
You can isolate stuff.
you can isolate stuff, and you can really, once you disconnect 1 or 2 units from like the clone ball hive mind that's going on, things break down quickly. And I think units that are able to do that, like very few force users in the game, like Vader's like one of them, but he kind of has to get in a little bit more close in order to make that work. I don't know. I mean, I still think Dooku is like overall a pretty like overcosted piece, but I do think that right now, if I was like looking for a time to play Dooku, and like Dooku would scare me a little bit. I think you can also build a shell around Dooku that the Republic lists are not going to like. You can build, Dooku Magna like B1 E5, is it E5S, whatever the
E5S is
range
the critical
for.
one.
Yeah. A bunch of like 6 or 7, somewhere between like maybe 6 to 7 range 4 guns that all have critical on them. The Republic lists don't love that already. You can probably pump that up to 9 or 10 activations if you're not like doing anything else janky. And I'm not sure it's like super great into the rest of what's going on right now, but with how frequently Republic is being taken, I think that could be very good.
And I mean, even into some of the other stuff, right? Like that we're talking about, you'll probably have a decent Dooku target with a Boba or an Ahsoka or something like that, or a Maul in Shadow Collective. So it's not
Cad
like,
Bane.
ah, man. Yeah, Cad Bane.
Cad Bane hates dealing with Dooku.
Yeah.
Because Cad Bane does not want to be in melee with force users that can win priority against him.
No.
Cunning is huge. And
Cunning's
frankly, like all of the, like with Vader kind of like on the downswing, a lot of the force users that are being played right now are kind of low health and fragile. Like we're looking at Yoda, who like, yes, he can generate dodge tokens, but he's one of the more fragile force users as far as like once he starts having to roll defense dice, like you're not really super thrilled about it. Maul, Shadow Collective Maul, also very fragile piece, specifically if you don't have immune pierce anymore, right? And Ahsoka in these rebel lists like almost always has to kind of carry the game on her back a little bit, which means Dooku's going to be able to probably Makashi her too. And yeah, she might have a dodge token or 2, but like you're still probably netting like 2 or 3 every time you swing Dooku saber at her. So I don't know. Yeah, I think when you're seeing more Vaders, like Dooku obviously is like a lot less good in a Vader than most other force users, because he's gonna have to swing 3 times in a Vader to kill him.
But on the flip side too, if you're taking Dooku with Magnas, you don't really have good options for those force users who have to carry the game, right? Like Ahsoka, she doesn't want to go and start swinging her lightsaber at Magna guards. That's just going to be a bad time for her. Now, if they've got a lot of piercing, high velocity, and long range guns, then they might be feeling, they might be able to chip away at those Magnas before they close in. So it depends, but Ahsoka herself is not going to have a good time in that matchup trying to hard carry.
Speaking of things that do good damage at long range, or at least reliable damage at long range, what about one Mr. Din Djarin with his Amban rifle?
No.
Did Sam put you up to this?
No. I have witnesses actually. The
Okay.
5280 guys, I'm in their chat. And I brought up Din, I think a couple weeks ago in that one, simply because there are very few things now in the game remaining after the choke nerf that actually bypass defensive tech.
Sure.
The Amban, by definition, does that because it's not an attack.
But like,
Now,
it's just not
yes,
enough.
I get that it is like one wound, probably, and there's even like a 25% chance that it's not that. But one wound a turn against Yoda or even like arcs, that's meaningful when you can stack it on top of like Iden or Cassian, some extra long range firepower there, plus some snipers and some long range critical. It's not like he has to do it all by himself, right? So I don't know. I'm not, look, he can be expensive when you take him with other stuff. So I'm really only advocating as like, look, people take Iden at 115 points as often purely like a sniper Iden. And most of the time she's going to be with marksman. She's going to be just getting one critical off of those 2 black dice, which means that she's killing 1 model a turn. And that, by the way, is subject to things like barrier, protector guardian, stuff like that. Whereas, Din Djarin with just his Amban rifle is also 115 points. And his 1 wound per turn is not subject to any of that stuff. So I think if people are going to pay 115 points for Iden for that 1 unlimited range wound a turn, I think it's defensible. Like if you want to just double down on that and take Din and do another unlimited range wound a turn. I don't
Can
know.
I take Inferno Squad with Din and get Tax Strike too?
You just take all 3 of them.
Well,
It
that's
fits.
true. Yeah, if you want to do it in
I think you got to
Empire, yeah.
saturate. You got to saturate that element, right? So I'm not advocating just taking Din and like a Wookiee skew or something. I'm saying like if you run an Empire, you take Iden, you take Inferno, you take Din. You can even fit, by the way, those 2 snipers, Boba Fett, 2 shores and 2 mortars, and that's 10 activations. That's the thing that fits. You can also just kind of slot Din right into that like Ahsoka Cassian thing. Obviously, if you do that, you're like replacing Ahsoka. So the wisdom in that is its own separate question. But
you could replace K2. I'm not the world's biggest K2 fan.
That's true. You could cut an MK2, and that's the points difference between K2 and Din, basically. And then you're down to 10 activations.
I've been playing Electro Binox on Rebel Troopers instead of
exactly.
K2.
Yeah, which is basically what K2 does, right? Like he generates two aim tokens a turn for Cassian, and usually you only need 1 of those.
Yep.
So yeah, I could see that. Yeah, sure. You could do. The point is there's ways to fit him in a way that like in a list that already kind of leans into that long range defense bypassing damage archetype. And he does it like he does 1 more of those a turn. And sometimes that could be the difference, right? Between like maybe you got Cassian and he does like a double crit on Echo and does 2 wounds to Echo, and then you've got Din right there to take out Echo, right? Whereas previously Echo would just hide behind something the rest of the game and generate tokens. So sometimes that like 1 extra long range unlimited auto wound is significant. I don't know.
I feel sad losing out on that double speed 3 relentless into a big flamer shot, but like
he's not really very good at that anyway.
I mean, that 1 turn, he's pretty awesome.
Sure, the 1 turn is good.
Yeah. Exactly. That's the thing. I think it kind of gets into that territory when you're talking about counter lists as far as like over teching. It's like if you're going that hard into the skew, you might be really happy. It might give you a decent chance into the Yoda lists, and then into everything else. You're like this is not worth the points value. It's kind of it's like back in the day with dark lists. You skew incredibly hard with impact, and sure you're feeling like you have a chance into those dark lists, and then into everything else you're like, oh shoot, you're not armor, so now I'm less optimized. It's that tough You
Sure.
got to get a little bit, you got to be good, and you got to get a little bit lucky in that whatever you build your list for, you get to match up against. I don't know where this really fits, but I can talk a little bit about um the Wookiee Defender battle force.
Please. Yeah.
And it um it could be maybe decent to Yoda, just decent into a lot of stuff. If we're, a lot of the things we're looking at are fairly static lists with not a lot of movement ability, not to the extent of something like Blizzard or triple stabs, stuff like that. And so because I played against both the Flutter lists over the weekend, a couple weeks back, and they were decently close games. But I think the thing about the Wookiee battle force specifically that made me intrigued is the extra tech it has in breakthrough. Because as a Yoda player, for the most part, I don't worry about breakthrough that much, honestly, even against like a 10-act list. Like it's you line up in the middle, you corner them, and you blow them to pieces. But the Wookiee battle force specifically is extremely good at running away because of the extra speed 1 move that they get. So not only does something like Yoda start 2 activations behind, because it's, you can get to a 10-act list with it, but whenever you try to kill something to get those activations off, they just get further and further away from you. So I think that makes it interesting because it can kind of bring that objective skew back into play, because obviously bombing run, not unwinnable for Yoda. It's what I ended up playing and winning at. But again, it's something that is not ideal for the Yoda player, especially when they're out activated by multiple activations, and you can go drop a bomb on their entire clone ball. They'll probably not have a great time. So it's not a hard counter there, but it does have interesting things that I think a lot of other objective skews that are just trying for that breakthrough bombing run combo can't do, because they can't run away quite as effectively. And similarly, droids with CAD and Magnas, Pike gunline, Cassian gunline. These are lists that don't generally want to play those objectives either, and kind of need chip damage to get stuff through. And the Wookiee battle force loves it if you can only chip damage them. If you can't fire support and throw 15 dice in their face and one-shot them, then they just get closer, or further, depending on what the objective is. And barrier doesn't work in melee, so there is that too. All your shared dodges still work, but barrier doesn't.
And frankly, Wookiee lists tend to have a lot of Pierce.
Yeah.
Anyway, with the bowcasters, and then also in melee with lethal. So, clearly they don't like being fire supported, because it's all white saves. And I'm sure you've murdered your share of Wookiee, first spam lists, Mike. But certainly their weapon profiles, at least from a offensive standpoint, are good into red saves. So
yeah, for sure. I also think maybe in we didn't really talk about it when we were talking about the Empire, but I think it's probably one of the reasons Empire is maybe not having the greatest time right now is that Empire really doesn't like looking at 6 Wookiees across the table.
Nope.
It's a lot, but yeah.
What about Ewoks? So the reason I bring this up is there have actually been a couple of tournaments recently won by, like, not the ATST version, but like basically activation spam Ewoks, like 13, 14 activation Ewoks with Han and Chewie.
Yeah.
And they do the reckless diversion thing, and then they have, 12 units of Ewoks. Well, I guess 9 units of Ewoks plus the various heroes and stuff. And they just kind of get in there. and it's mostly an objective skew list, right? You're looking
Mhm.
to leverage all those scoring units and bet that your opponent can't kill all of them, basically. Um, but could you see that working against some of these meta lists?
I think, and I don't say this to like be mean to people, but I think that the reason that those like 14 act lists do so well is because people don't know how to handle situations where they're down that many activations from the jump. And I think they're very awkward situations if you've never been in before. It's very hard to play that game in a way that you win. And I think you can, like, from the Ewok side of the table, I think you can catch like 90% of the Legion player base kind of on unawares with that type of strategy. It's very hard. If you have to be very precise and calculated in how you dismantle a list that has 14 activations. That's just like part of the process. So I guess to that point, like, I think it probably can do pretty well at most tournaments. I think once you start getting into players that, like, the thing is, the list doesn't do things well as far as like anything outside of what you just described. like it doesn't actually really have tools in the toolbox is the thing, right? Like
It doesn't have attrition tools.
it doesn't have attrition tools. Once you start losing units, all of your like your power goes away, and obviously that's true of a lot of lists. But like the only thing that list is really leveraging is the fact that it gets to go 5 times after you do, right? And if you're able to take that ability away in the first few turns, by like shaving an activation off each turn without losing anything in response, because they can't really do range
They
damage
can't.
to you.
Yeah.
Like you know, as long as you're kiting them effectively and you know, working the map in a way that, and that's sort of what I mean with like, you have to be very precise about it. I think the game just sort of falls apart for them.
Well,
Yeah.
and two, right? Like a lot of those lists, and this kind of comes into a preparedness thing too, is yeah, 90%, maybe, if you threw out the number 90%, but then that 10% also like really knows how to use standbys effectively,
Yeah.
which takes a lot of that power away when your whole army is range
Range
2.
2, yeah.
And I think it could work maybe against some lists, like maybe against the more long range chip damage. Hey, someone brought Iden, Inferno, and Din and whatever, or Cassian and a whole bunch of snipers. But when you have to close in, when the big meta bad is Yoda and you have to close in,
It's like not
given
how
many 9 wound Wookiee squads I was one-shotting, I look at these Ewoks and say, oh, they only have whatever 7 wounds. Great, even easier to just pick up, and they can't threaten, as Mike is saying, they just can't threaten you. So, are there paths? Maybe on like a weird KP where you can just sit back the entire game and swarm, but even that is very hard just because of standby play, good Jedi counterplay, creating melees and stuff, and just the ability of some of these lists to just take hold of the center and play very aggressively.
Yeah, I think that was what I was going to say. I was like yes, like you can use terrain to your advantage, but if your opponent knows what they're doing against these like high act Ewok lists, they should be aggressing you and taking your activations off the table. And I actually think in the broader picture of things, talking about counters to the meta, if like specifically against the Yoda list, but to a lesser extent, I think Pike lists too, if your plan is to like get into melee and win the game there, that's just like, it might look good on its face. It's not a winning like counter pick strategy. It isn't.
You're not going to be able to plow through the dodge tokens in melee any more than like a ranged gun line is going to be able to do that.
No, and the Yoda list specifically, like Yoda's like, oh, you got into melee, sweet. I'm just gonna like rip apart your units with force push, standby, guidance, like shenanigans and stuff. And the pike line, just like you're not gonna kill anything. So, I'm overall with like the range 2 skew list. It doesn't have it for me.
That's fair. All right. Any other thoughts?
I think.
I've
Go ahead.
I've been putting together a Din, Iden, Inferno, Bosk, ATST list.
Bosk,
That's
There's
yeah,
a lot of words.
That's a lot of things.
that all
Yeah.
fits. And you even
Sorry,
get
can you run that by me again?
yeah, Din with the Amban,
Uh-huh.
Iden with her rifle and Dio.
Okay.
The only reason Dio's there is because I didn't find a way to use the other 15 points better yet.
Okay.
Can you get 4 more points and get a medic in there or something?
I don't know. I mean, maybe. It's got Inferno, no upgrades. Boss, no upgrades. ATST with the Hammers pilot and a mortar launcher for your 9 die range 4 shots. Shore with a T-21, R297C Stormtrooper, and a TF-90 mortar.
You know the old adage of like before you go out, look at the mirror and like take off one thing,
Yeah.
one piece of jewelry. I think that applies to that list. I think there
Yeah.
might be something there, but I think the one thing is probably the ATST.
I don't know. I actually think the ATST is the reason that this list is actually. That would be the last thing I think I would take
Interesting.
out of this list. Personally, I think that's the thing that kind of would potentially push this list over the top. It combos well with Inferno and Gideon, or not Gideon, Tell. And I think it actually allows this list to survive into matchups where you need to do like real damage as opposed to like
Chip damage.
chip damage.
Okay.
I don't know if it's good. I just like when I Kyle, you mentioned and talking about Din and just the Amban,
Yeah.
and I would just like immediately went to Legion HQ as is my way and started like playing with numbers, and I was like, that's just a lot of ranged 4 guns that bypass a lot of traditional defensive tech.
As much as I love Boba, I mean, yeah, Bosk makes a lot of sense there because if you're tossing 5 crits on line and weight, you can bury your 1, and that's it. Then it's 4 Pierce 1 coming through.
Notably, we haven't talked about Bosk today, and we probably should have.
Yeah. Tools.
Yeah, I mean, I think like as long as you're playing Bosk in a way that you keep him as safe as possible, he's gonna if some of these lists get a hold of him, they can and will one shot him. But as long as you're playing casually with him, you should be fine. He does the damage and is a very cheap, efficient piece to do it into the lists with defensive tech. Not great into pikes, obviously, but into the Republic list specifically, the suppressive is decent into pikes.
Suppressive is good, and you got to chew through those dodges somehow.
You do,
and he still has that 1 line and weight shot. That's pretty good. But yeah, even Reptilian Rampage, just like stripping dodges and putting out a bunch of suppressive is, especially if it's a Courage 1 pike list, not bad.
Also, I mean, I know that this is like a little bit silly, but a card doesn't care about how many dodge tokens and barriers.
Whistling Birds. Are you gonna say Whistling Birds?
No.
Okay,
I wasn't.
Good. Okay.
I was gonna say Merciless Munitions.
Yeah, I was thinking about this the other day too. Like drop that in the middle of I mean, look, getting close enough to do that, a challenge potentially.
If you like last first with Bosk and just accept that he's gonna die, but you put you strip a bunch of their dodge tokens with the bomb and then just put 8 poison tokens down, like
yeah, that could add up.
That's if you put 8 poison tokens down on an Anakin or Yoda ball with Bosk, like he's made his points back probably.
Yeah. In addition to stripping most, if not all, the dodge tokens in the process.
Right. Like the defensive tech for the list should just be gone pretty much at the opening of the turn. I'm not saying that that's the thing that's going to actually work, but it is an interesting thing that you potentially could do.
Yeah, especially in that list. Like if you're not teching up Din a whole lot, you don't really need his 1 pip. So then there's less competition there. You're probably still taking the item 1 pip. Yeah.
Yeah. End of turn, reptilian rampage and move 3 times. And then merciless munitions and just move again, four speed 2 moves, then drop a bomb.
Yeah,
It's a thing you can do.
definitely could
Hopefully,
work.
I mean, if you're close enough, you could drop a bomb and take a shot at someone at the
Yeah.
same time,
Yep.
which is not too bad.
Anyhow, just counter thoughts that didn't come up until
No,
this
I think that's interesting. I mean, I love Bosk. I've always been a big fan of Bosk. Um, and that critical is going to go a long way most of the time against most things. So
I still remember Lone Star a couple of years back when Shadow Collective just came out, and I hadn't played Bad Guys yet, so I was finally able to play Bosk. And I remember just playing him on. I was like, I was always scared of Bosk, and then people were like, "Oh, he's not so good anymore. Like, I don't even take line and weight or whatever." And I remember just getting the chance to play him, and I was like, "What the heck, people? Like this guy is so freaking.
good.
He's still
Yeah.
so good. Why
Yeah.
is he? Why are people down on him? He's and this might be his time to shine for exactly those reasons.
He
And he can
breaks a
fit
lot of
into
the
those
defense.
CAD lists too.
Yeah.
With order control. If the Magna ones, I'd have to look at the list. You'd have to really make sure you can. I'm not sure if you would have enough order control on him with the reverse sort, but there's definitely ways to do it where you end up with, whether he's paired with CAD or maybe you could pair him with Asajj if you want that Makashi and get just operative tokens in the bag, and then you're going to have activation control and like activation advantage and perfect order control, which is what you need to make Bosk work in that matchup.
Yeah, I think my closest game at Crucible, I think, was against Separatist CAD Bosk, I think. And a bunch of like range 4 critical spam between Magnus and like E5Ss and stuff. We were playing KP and it just like, neither of us really wanted to get too close to the other because we're trying to hide the whole game, right? And getting shot by Bosk and a bunch of critical guns is not really what any of the public stuff's looking to have done. So
yeah, particularly at range 4.
yeah. So,
yeah.
I do think, speaking of droids, that experimental droids, there could be something there as well. Again, a lot of this, I haven't had enough time to really put things through the ringer, so a lot of it's kind of coming from what have I played against and kind of thought, oh, that has some situations, just because it's a list that can actually hang you to beat this meta. Obviously, you need something that can do well in close range and punish things that are trying to get close, but also work well at range, because there's things that are going to hurt you in both. And I think experimental droids can do that. The version I was playing against, it had the tank with the high velocity shells and full BX snipers and some fully loaded B2s as well. Not fully loaded. They didn't have the blast gun. They just had the range 2 gun, right? So it's a bit of mishmash, and it can be got, but again, depending on the board layout too, that can also help. Just in the sense of, hey, the clones don't want to cross the board if it's a wide open board. But then if it is there, you've got some B2s that could potentially light things up. And at the range game, they've got pretty easy access to repair. They've got good access to dodges with stuff like Kalani to make it hard for arcs to punch through. And they can throw range 5 piercing sniper shots with red, black, white, with aims behind it and lethal. And one of those shots isn't too bad, a couple, but when you layer in multiple shots like that, plus the tank, it can start, wearing things down over the course of a game. So being able to, we're talking like, I can kill maybe one thing, but also not lose something kind of territory, which is how you kind of have to win the long range game. It's not perfect because, it can still get blown up real good if the clone player is able to get aggressive. But I think as far as something that has legs and potentially has a chance and can make life a little difficult, I think there's something to experimental droids as well. of course, it's one of those lists. If Yoda gets in, it's GG. Well, it still has the Super Tac 2 pip, but it's probably not going to help you too much.
Yeah. Yeah, Bosk is interesting. I might have to think about him again. I was making I was trying to think about objective skews with Bosk. And you can actually do like a Cad Bane Bosk double bounty stats list. You know, and then you've got your 2 bounty hunters possibility, obviously, as well as you can play all the speeder objectives. Now, clearly that list doesn't fit Magna's, so that's not great.
Yeah.
But you know, it's an interesting objective skew with double bounty. But yeah, Bosk is really any part of. I was talking about Din earlier at 115 points. Bosk is 10 points cheaper
and way better at everything.
Yeah, he kind of fills that same thing. Now, clearly, I guess you could triple down, right, and do like
do both,
Iden, Bosk, and Din,
and also
all
an
at the same time,
as well as an Inferno squad.
Sure, right, exactly.
Can you get Palp in there too? Can we get some pull?
I mean, you could probably just change the ATST and like a heavy weapon on one of the core units out for Palp, right?
You probably could, honestly.
Roughly,
that'd be pretty close in points. Yeah,
I mean, it's
it's interesting.
I mean, like, hold up. So that ATST is 170. So clear that and the T21, and
it's pretty close. You need some upgrades on Palp, though.
Yeah, you're gonna want like expensive ones like burst barrier and
burst barrier
anger or something. So.
Yeah. Well, you can cut Dio. Right? So cut Dio.
There you go. Okay.
27 points for upgrades for Palp.
That's probably enough. Burst barrier is 20. Anger's 3. You can take
probably want
a steamed leader.
So burst barrier.
Just so that you can like feed lots of aims to Iden and or Bosk for the pull the strings on extra shots. But
all right, you heard it here first, folks. Counter meta, Iden, Bosk, Palpatine.
Locked and loaded. Does this come out? It won't come out before list lock, so you won't see it at PAX, but you'll see it every tournament after cleaning up.
Yep, that's gonna be it. All right. Well,
I'm gonna mess around with stuff like that for sure.
I love bounty hunters. I would encourage people to do so. You know, I think making the metas are meant to be cyclical. You know,
they are, and I'm intrigued. I'm actually intrigued by this Bosk discussion for 2 reasons. One, I love Bosk. 2, as those on the 5th Trooper Discord will know, I was doing like a last minute painting blitz on Rebels, and then I lost a part of my airbrush. I think that it went down the drain of my sink.
Classic. Yeah.
I was cleaning it out because it clogged, because I'm painting a lot of things at once, and being too hasty. And I think that I dropped it's called a checking nut, but it's basically the thing that you screw onto the back of the needle so that the needle actually like grips with the trigger and goes back and forth. And I think I lost it down the street. So my airbrush no longer actually sprays paint. I'm getting a replacement part, but that's a long way of saying currently I have a Rebel list submitted. It is the Han list that I previously talked about. It does rely on begging, borrowing, and stealing Rebels from people.
Wait, isn't this the thing that's like lists are due in like a matter of 2 hours or something?
No, yes. They're I thought they were due tomorrow night.
Are they due?
Okay. But it will be a throw something together, sight unseen, like untested. Go for it. Hey,
I mean,
I'm
to
all
say
for that.
that anything Kyle is playing that has Bosk in it is untested, I think
that's true.
Fair.
That's not fair. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, let's get the list submission deadline correct, because this will come out Tuesday tomorrow, so we should know if people actually have time.
It's Tuesday
after this comes out
for some of us.
I haven't submitted my list, so this is relevant to me. So let's find out.
Okay.
I was under the impression.
Just do it, Mike. You know what you're gonna play. Just do it. Just put it in there.
I procrastinate just because I can.
You can always change your list on Game Uplink, people. So just put a list in, and then you can always change it at the last minute.
Okay. List must be submitted no later than November 28th at 11:59 p.m. Eastern, which is tomorrow, Tuesday, or today, Tuesday, if you're in Europe, like Matt is.
Yeah, I was looking. I was like, that's today. Oh no.
Yeah, 11:59 p.m. So it is due tomorrow night, Tuesday night by midnight, basically.
There you go. So people can hear this and
So
counter Mike,
send
much
me
like Kyle.
your Bosk lists. I don't have an ATST, but maybe I'll do Din Bosk.
Do you have a painted din?
Pelp. You like yourself some Pelp.
I do. I do not have a painted Din. However, I
You can use
did.
mine if you'd like.
So I did manage to get him primed and zenithal highlighted before my airbrush clogged, because he was briefly a component of my Cassian Han list ideas. So I would just need to hand paint Din in the next couple days, which I can do.
It's doable. It's
And
doable.
all my other Empire stuff is painted. Whereas for that Rebel list, I've got to live, like 20 things basically that need to be painted. But I have basically any combination of an Iden list that involves short troopers. I have like 100% fully painted. So,
Do it.
I don't know.
Yeah.
We'll see. Is it better than the Cassian though? I think Cassian's better.
I think Bosk is a better piece than Cassian. However, I think most of the things that go around Cassian and the Cassian list are better than the things that go around Bosk and the Bosk lists.
They both get one shot pretty easily. I think they're pretty on par there, honestly.
The Cassian list is definitely better at saturating long range critical and pierce than the Empire version.
Yes, I do think I think like on its face, Bosk is a much better character than Cassian. Bosk is like
Bosk is great.
Bosk is great. Cassian does one thing and kind of one thing only. For
And
the most part.
It's not like Cassian's 100 points. Like to do that one thing, he does need support.
Yes.
Specifically K2 or something with a Binoc
or Binocs, which is kind of like two guys with Binocs is basically the same cost as K2. Now you have to take that core, but it's slower ramp up. No, I think there's something to a boss guide and plus something. Like you're still fitting Bosk, Inferno, 2 snipers, Iden, like that's a lot. I mean, if you can fit Boban, you can even rule with respect, but then your 3 pips, you don't have the 3 pip slots really.
3 pips awkward.
That's the problem.
Fitting Boba into a list with Bosk and Iden is like
it's too much. Yeah,
it's too much with the command cards. Fitting Din in there as purely a Amban bot is much more doable because his command cards are bad.
Yep.
He doesn't care. Yeah.
So, and Bosk's command, he's only got 3 command cards to Boba's 6, so it's less of an awkward fit with Iden too. I don't know.
You generally don't even take all of Bosk's either.
I think you might want all of them.
I think
the one pip's
the one pip is the one you usually drop, but in this situation, I think you want it.
Yeah.
I could see taking play.
Yeah, I mean that's what Izzy ran for a long time. That was successful, right?
Yeah.
I think he might have had Cad Bane instead of Bosk. I don't remember, but
you're talking about the list he played at LVO.
He also played it at Gen Con. He won
playing,
Gen Con.
He was playing IG-88.
Oh yeah, okay.
I
played him in the quarters.
That's the other thing.
Good. It's flimsy. It can be flimsy.
IG-88 is also in that same points range as Din, and it's like
it's not close. Din's so bad.
He falls into that rebel hero discussion of he just needs to be like way cheaper for what he's bringing.
He needs to be like 20 points cheaper.
I think you can
or needs a way to move out of melee.
Free. I don't think Din's chassis necessarily needs to be cheaper. I think 105 is like
just give him the backpack for free.
Yeah, give him the backpack.
Jetpack. Yeah.
Make some of like the flamer like relatively free.
He pays 3 more points for the exact same flamer than Boba Fett, who also gets to be cheaper, which is just
right. And Din needs a way for his pistol to not suck because he doesn't have marksman, he doesn't have critical, he doesn't have sharpshooter. So like you're just always bouncing that every time.
He just to pile on the list, he just needs a rule like basically everyone else has in the bounty hunter world that if you have if you're engaged with someone who's immobilized, you can just move out of engagement. Yep. Like Cad can do that, Boba can do that. That we've seen it.
That would go a
Din,
long
with General
way.
Grievous, with
Yeah.
these very expensive characters who want to be in melee and don't have force push, is a problem.
Yeah, because then they're stuck thwacking at a single V1 or something when they'd
Yeah.
much rather be doing literally anything else. Yep. All right. Well, folks, send me your thoughts on whether I should beg, borrow, steal a Rebel Cassian Han list, or whether you'd like to see me play an Empire list with Boss. And possibly Din. Because that is way more doable for my bringing my own stuff perspective than the Han list. But anyway. All right. Any final thoughts?
That's it.
Yeah.
Pretty
I think
exhaustive.
We're good
Yeah.
to go.
All right. Well, we are the Notorious Scoundrels. I'm Kyle.
I'm Mike.
I'm a Bombad General, and I'm Matt. Yeah. I don't think I can claim to be a notorious scoundrel. I'm just a dude who's showing up and talking.
You're here as a person who's talking on Scoundrels. You can claim.
I don't know how your initiation works. I haven't been hazed yet, so
it's funny. It's
don't
always
worry, it's coming.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's there. Yeah. It is always a little funny. I do this on purpose when we have guests because and you by the way do in fact work for the Fifth Trooper Network in many capacities. So I would not characterize you this way, but like sometimes we'll have a guest who's just literally from outside the network, and we do the, we are the Notorious Scoundrels thing, and it's just funny watching what people do and whether they decide to say their name or like something else. Or anyway, it's a fun little game.
nice.
Anyway, stay fresh, cheese bags.
Boom, boom, boom.